Hello, wisdom-loving internet humanoids. Today we tackle the question of being an artist. I say question because it's very questionable what is art and what is a true artist and all that crap. So I have a bunch of notes I'm going to read off, so bear with me. So yeah, being an artist. Since I was a kid, they used to ask me this tired old stupid question, is art for the artist or the public? And you know what? I always have the same answer. Art is for the artist. And if it happens to influence or inspire anyone else, that's accidental and even more magical because it happened in the most organic way. Nothing wrong with wanting to benefit society, obviously, to want to inspire people, but that cannot be your starting point. And let me explain. Art is self-expression, an extension of the artist, therefore as personal and individualistic as anything gets. Art cannot be separated from the artist. There's no judging someone's art without judging the person. And it takes place in the top self-actualization level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Amazingly, engaging in an artistic activity is self-elevating and fulfilling, while you may still be struggling to meet those more primary basic needs for food and shelter and safety at the bottom of the hierarchy list. This is exactly why the starving artist exists, because art is perhaps the only way to get a glimpse of what meeting one's higher, in other words, spiritual needs would feel like. It isn't the body, but primarily the spirit that needs the art. It is also true that a spiritually less evolved person may not even have a desire to create art, or if they do create something, as is the case with people who go into the arts with the primary intention of making money or getting attention from the opposite sex, the piece will naturally be less powerful in terms of producing the intensity of feeling and movement. The substance of art is very much a reflection of someone's level of spiritual development. I doubt there's a single person in this world who was ever moved by Hitler's excruciatingly dull, depressive, and visually disturbing paintings. If you are spiritually inclined while your bodily needs can take a step back, like myself, then you will tend to prioritize your art even as you starve. You will still be looking at everything through a lens of how can I bring the beauty even out of the ugly piece of trash. As they say, this is a way of seeing the world, seeking and finding beauty and meaning even in the seemingly most insignificant things. So I am currently struggling in a way most of you in the first world couldn't last a day experiencing, but I'm still engaging in my artistic activities any moment I breathe because my spirit is needier than my body. I can survive on very little food. I've never had a physically satisfying or safe relationship with the opposite sex, but if I had to live without art or music for one day, I would have zero will to live. Such recognition then brings me to my next profound realization, the millennia-old question. Who is the real artist? In a world where anyone and everyone can claim to be an artist overnight? I believe the answer is implied in the first point I just made. Artist is anyone who does art for art's sake and not for anything else, such as public or monetary gain, to meet a physical need, such as finding an eligible partner by impressing them with the art. Take someone like Reberger, rich and famous, a 1%er artist of Germany, who hires a bunch of people to do everything from designing to executing the art, where he's about barely 2% involved in the entire creation process. The shallowness and insecurity that ails a man's soul inescapably shows up in his art or his idea of what art is. Obviously, in a world where you need money and influence to buy you the title of artist, you're the farthest thing from an artist. Not to mention, it's inconceivable that anyone buys from him because the art moved them in any way, but because of the popularity of the name pushed by other very rich and powerful folks from the same tribe as he, creates an artificially inflated investment value, so the whole transaction has zero heart and soul in it. Thus no real art. And sorry, yeah, I am the judge of that. So the people who buy these objects with his name on it, just a mere signature, even when, he's barely involved in the process, they do not buy it for its emotional value. The true artist's practice has zero, and I mean zero, nothing, no, nada, to do with who sees it, who hears it, who likes it, who finds value in it, and who finds it worthless, or who puts it in a fancy gallery, or who hangs it in their toilet. Art is just as sacred as the relationship between the creator and the created, and communal places of worship like churches and temples, and so-called religious authorities like priests and rabbis. It's the same kind of thing. Nothing can actually come between you and your God. In the same manner, nothing can come between the art and the artist. Any intervention or influence on that relationship is disrespectful and unholy. This is why I find any practice of art education that has the audacity to teach anything other than technique to be an abhorrent and insulting act a corrupt and even diabolical thing to do. I find especially the so-called conceptual art schools like Schule in Frankfurt to be more abhorrent than military prisons. In a truly artistically advanced society, those places and the clowns they employ could not exist. In fact, in said society, conceptual art would not exist either, because what is conceptual art but a desperate effort to collect false evidence and justification from the public that their art is worth something? Plus, what is more exhausting in this world than trying to prove the worth of anything to anyone? That's a torturous and mandatory duty of capitalism built on the infinite growth model in a planet with finite resources where mass production and mass consumption depend on convincing every consumer of the value of the object of consumption. A true artist, again, has zero need to prove anything to anyone through conjuring up a bunch of nonsensical schizophrenic statements to sell something. No true artist goes to a conceptual art school or engages in that kind of thing, by the way. I truly believe that. He or she inherently knows that it's all smoke and mirrors. Any institutionalization and legitimization of a position of authority over art cannot exist outside the context of interacting with effectively manipulated or fooled audiences. Any attempt to come between the art and the artist, that absolutely private and sacred relationship, can work to pollute, corrupt, and taint that relationship. There's no good reason to go to art schools, and I find anyone who claims to teach anything beyond technique to be a charlatan. I believe that the fact that anyone who is a true artist and must monetize their arts to make a living is the sign that we live in a pretty pathetic world. Job titles such as art appraiser, art curator, and art director are symptoms of a greater global disease, in my opinion. They're like job titles working for a corrupt institution I call the Ministry of Soul Prostitution. Having to put a price tag on something you created that is a direct impression of your soul with your own sweat and blood to then permanently part with it is indeed akin to selling your own child in the slave market. This is why to an artist it'll always be easier and less painful to part with the piece they were commissioned to do based on a client's desire. That piece won't be the pure expression of the authentic heart and soul of the artist. But you want to tell me that something that kept me going through the toughest times, as something I need as much as I need oxygen, can have a price tag? To me, that's as ridiculous as charging people for the amount of oxygen they're allowed to take in their lungs. Self-expression is literally the act of breathing out. For every breath we take, we have to release an equal amount back. If we can't express the colors and sounds of our unique and authentic soul, we might as well be soulless robots. I accept that we can measure technical skill and mastery of artisanship, but there's no plausible yardstick to appraise the inherent value of anyone's unique expression. I do believe that some of us lead lives that are rather superficial and inauthentic, which will effectively suppress our connection to our inner creative agency. Some art can indeed have more depth of meaning in the eyes of more viewers if the elements in the art appeal to a rather universally powerful concept, such as feelings all humans share, regardless of the cultures that shape their perception of the world. But earlier I gave the example of Hitler's paintings to illustrate how art and the artist are a single unit. But even then, a piece of art cannot be said to have less value if it appeals to fewer people. Value is utterly subjective and circumstantial. I love this example someone made online. They're saying, if your toilet blew up, the most valuable skill at that moment isn't a heart surgeon, but a plumber. So over here, I will continue to engage in art only for art's sake, and will never see the visibility or invisibility, the monetization or non-monetization of my art as any measure of its value. Even as a kid, I was never influenced by praise or put-downs. Art is a private act, and it is no one's business, really. I won't be any less or more dedicated to my artistic journey based on how it interacts with the world. Likes, validation, popularity, these things are not a measure of anything in the grand scheme of things. People flock to crowded places like flies are attracted to shit. This is testimony of our propensity towards conformity and our bias towards social approval, as it is tied to our survival from very early childhood. Most people cannot update this setting in favor of critical thinking for fear of marginalization. Just remember that at Washington, D.C. social experiment where a world-class violinist was barely noticed while playing in baggy clothes on the dirty subway platform, yet applauded endlessly in the big concert hall where people paid big money to come see perform. The incredible difference. We live in a world that is pretty shallow and immature, like a child who's fascinated by shiny things, even when they're worthless and useless on the inside. Those shiny things of the adult world are the perceptions of value artificially created by pumping big money to psychologically manipulative marketing strategies designed to take advantage of this default immaturity of the easily impressionable average human brain, allowing them to spend insane money on luxury brand goods for the brand rather than the product itself. I arrived at these conclusions that I listed here since I was a little kid who learned to think independently. So For yourselves, feel free to participate in the corruption that is rampant in the art world of today. A market that lacks a moral compass, rules of fair play, or common sense. A market in which the winner, the money, the privilege takes all, and some of the most corrupt men find ample opportunity to comfortably engage in tax evasion and money laundering schemes. So thanks for listening, and you can go back to pursue popular ideas, popular people, and seek to be popular in how you present to the world. Even so, I want you to know that you and your art are worthy, even if there's not a single soul who will like or pay for it, because no one and no creation is less valuable in the eyes of the Creator.